So let me introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Richard Blythmann from Algovera, and I will throw him up now. And Richard, maybe you could tell me a little bit about what you're going to present today.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm gonna, since the conference is on LLMs, I thought I would give a bit of an introduction to LLMs and why they represent such a paradigm shift. I don't think it's well known. Everyone knows that LLMs are a big thing and everyone's played with ChatGPT, but I think a lot of people haven't realized what's possible to build on top of LLMs.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's about 5 after, give or take 30 seconds. So I'll let you take the presentation. If you want to put up slides, just hit the present button.
Okay, let me present slides. Oh, wait. Share screen. All right. Okay. So let me know if you can't see my screen. I'm going to as I mentioned, what I'm going to talk about today is LLMs as a paradigm shift. And it's quite difficult to keep up with all of the stuff that's going on in the AI space. It's happening so fast, and people, of course, don't have a chance to keep up with LLMs as well as crypto. And so I kind of see my role is to evangelize and transfer knowledge about what's happening in the LLM space and why they're such a big deal. Just a quick chat about my previous talk. So I talked about the intersection of LLM agent frameworks and crypto agent frameworks, which I think is a really promising area. Crypto is really good at frameworks and protocols, and this includes all sorts of frameworks like agents, DAOs, marketplace protocols. But frameworks need an engine, and we believe that LLMs are the engine and really unlock a lot of utility from all of these existing crypto frameworks that we have that include agent frameworks and DAO frameworks. And there's a link for the talk if you want to watch it. Everyone is talking about LLMs in crypto, but the main focus is usually around training LLMs, and in my opinion, thinking about the previous paradigm of AI, which involves training models, updating the weights of the models, all these sorts of things. And I think that what this means is that a lot of people don't understand the paradigm shift that LLMs represent, and that's what I'm hoping to communicate today. So you might have seen a lot of theses coming out from the crypto space on AI, and one very notable omission was building on top of LLMs. A lot of them had decentralized training of LLMs, which in my opinion is a little bit backward looking. What we should be doing in crypto is not matching the previous generation of AI and kind of decentralizing it. We should be trying to target what the next generation of AI and decentralize that. So this is what a lot of people think prompt engineering is. This is a prompt given to Stable Diffusion or something like that, where you have to say Ultra HD 4K to get what you want. And a lot of people think that prompt engineering is going to go away. I guess my definition of prompt engineering might be a little bit different to everyone else's. I definitely think that these really long prompts with these descriptions are going to go away, but prompt engineering is still going to be really important. And by prompt engineering in this case, I mean all of different stuff that you can fit in the prompt, samples of data, approaches to reasoning. You can kind of teach the model how to do things in the prompt, and I think this part is not going to go away. So I've just picked out 3 of the really big things that I think are significant about large language models and how they completely change the AI space in general. So there's this new thing called in-context learning. There's an example shown on the right. You can see the input prompt in the box with the blue, and then the model output is showed in the box with the green. So a lot of the time people would just ask a question in the input and then receive an answer in the output, right? But what people learned was that in the input prompt, you can actually give an example of a question and answer. So the one with Roger there is the question, and in the prompt we also give the answer. So this is us demonstrating what a good question and answer looks like. And then as the last part of the prompt, we ask a question, and it'll provide an answer. Now in this case, it gets it wrong just because the purpose of the figure is to show something else, which we'll see in a later slide. But actually, providing these demonstrations of questions and answers in the input prompts really improves the performance compared with just asking the question. So yeah, this is called in-context learning, giving data demonstrations in the input prompt itself. And you'll notice in this case, this is very different to the way that we traditionally feed data to models. Usually feeding data to models happens during the training procedure when we're updating the weights of the model. Here, the weights of the model are never updated. We just give it data samples in the input prompt. So it's a very different way of feeding data to models. That doesn't involve any training whatsoever. And what people have found is that you require much fewer data samples compared to fine-tuning when you use in-context learning. It behaves very different to fine-tuning in general. And this really opens up a ton of possibilities. Like, for example, there's a paper here that I link that says, if you use an LLM locally and you do personalization with in-context learning, so this could be like user data that's local on my laptop. I can personalize the behavior of the language model using this data. It's actually competitive with federated learning, where actual training happens, and it achieves even better privacy. So this is like a massive paradigm shift as far as I'm concerned. You know, do we even need federated learning all the time anymore? Or can we just use local LLMs that are pre-trained with in-context learning? So that's really significant. Personalization previously needed a full training set, now just a few in-context demonstrations. The second really big thing with LLMs is that they generalize to unseen tasks much more. So in the previous generation of AI, we fine-tuned models, and after we fine-tuned them, if you provide some example that is kind of outside the distribution of the training set, so what that means is like quite different to examples in the training set, it would struggle. But what we find is that as the models pass a certain size, they get much better with data outside the distribution of the training set. And this ability to generalize actually comes from the instruction tuning. So you like train the model on instructions, and then we find that it generalizes to unseen instructions, which is like really, really surprising. The significance of this is that generalization is really important for deployment. Users will always provide a prompt that you didn't have in your training set, and so this is like a really huge unlock for deploying ML in production. The last big reason that I think it's LLMs are a paradigm shift is their ability to do reasoning. Okay, so there's this thing called chain of thought prompting. What you basically do is the example is shown on the right. So on the left-hand side, we see an example without chain of thought prompting, and then on the right-hand side, we see an example with chain of thought prompting. So you'll notice that in the demonstration that we show in the input prompt for question and answering, we show it how to like take a step-by-step procedure to answer the question. And just by demonstrating how to do this step-by-step or like chain of thought reasoning, it manages to get the answer right, because you're basically saying is, show your intermediate workings. This ability to reason emerges only in large language models, and people really aren't like fully sure where this ability emerges from, but many people think it's a side effect of training on code. The significance of this is that LLMs are reasoning engines, and this opens up a whole new range of possibilities for building on top of them. So just a quick summary. The big things that LLMs can do that the previous generation of machine learning or deep learning models could do is they can personalize things on the fly with very few examples. They can perform general tasks, and they can even perform reasoning over things. And what a lot of people think is that these abilities mean that LLMs can become the next generation of a computing platform. And the main point that I want to make is that most people, if LLMs are a new computing platform, most people in crypto are still thinking about building a new CPU. In other words, like using decentralized training to create these new large language models. What I really want to push people to think about is, okay, yeah, sure, we can use crypto to create new CPUs, but what about the operating system that lies on top of the CPU? What about this whole new computing platform? How do we actually decentralize that? And this is just a teaser as a very last slide. But I'm working on a white paper at the moment, and it's going to hopefully include a lot of stuff around what a decentralized AI OS looks like. I've been diving into the history of operating systems a little bit. So an operating system is a type of platform, and usually they're built on top of modular architectures. Many different firms, like thousands of firms, can develop different modules for that platform or for that operating system, and they design them to be interchangeable and compatible with other modules. And these become building blocks for the larger system. Platforms are intermediaries between different model producers and system assemblers. And platforms can take various forms like marketplaces, industry consortia, or technical standards bodies. So yeah, this kind of ties in with the like mini conference series, which is about like AI crypto standards. What would standards for a decentralized AI OS look like, and how can we bring everyone together to build this new type of decentralized AI operating system rather than just training new models, which is still important, but there's a whole new generation of possibilities.
Cool. Thanks for that. That's really interesting. So we have a couple of minutes for questions now. I'm going to check the chat and see if we have any user questions or viewer questions rather. And if not, I have some things that your talk made me think of. Okay. So yeah, if you want to ask Richard a question, now's a great time. You can place it into the event chat and I'll read it to him. I'm not sure if he can see them as easily, so I'll just make sure to read them. And then that's also good for our people on the replay, so they'll have a little bit of context. Because sometimes when you watch these replays, you just hear the answer to the question and you don't get to hear what it is. So something I wanted to ask you about is since these LLMs have been going viral, particularly around prompting, I see these like trends in prompting. And sometimes I followed them only to then later learn that I'm crafting the prompt based on like my mental model of how the model will take my prompt and use it. So I'm curious what you think people misunderstand about prompting that we could do a better job of communicating.
Yeah, I think prompting is still really important. But how, like, a lot of people, when they hear prompt engineering for the first time, they kind of laugh at it and say, oh, it's just like, writing, ultra HD 4K afterwards. And that is kind of part of it at the moment. And I think that is the part that might disappear in time. But really prompt engineering, I think like prompt programming is a better term, because what we're doing in the prompt is we're using different amounts of space in the prompt to get a certain behavior out of the model. So maybe I will allow a certain amount of space in the prompt to show it different demonstrations of how to do things. So this is kind of like personalizing it on the fly. Another one is like I can show it a step-by-step procedure to elicit a certain type of like reasoning behavior out of it and all that sort of stuff. And so I still think it's important to add all of these like kind of details in the prompts, but really prompts are much more than that. It's like a local memory store where you can program the LLM on the fly, I suppose.
Cool. So I have two audience questions. First is from Wes Floyd, who asks, what would a killer app look like for a decentralized AI/LLM operating system?
Yeah, I didn't talk too much about apps. I talked more about the operating system itself, I guess. But I think there's a ton, and usually these look like things that are built with LangChain. For example, like workflows, different LLM workflows, different LLM assistants, different LLM agents. And I think the killer app is really agents, if I'm honest. I think that's like the holy grail of where we're going. And these agents need to be built on top of LLMs. Like we've had agent frameworks for a really long time now. People built really convincing agent frameworks back in the 50s. But what was missing was the engine that allows, reasoning, learning, personalizing on the fly, all these sorts of things. And now we have that engine. And so now all of these old ideas about like agent frameworks come back into play and we can experiment with all of them again.
Okay, I have another one from one of our community members, Peter Amafidon. Peter asks, hi, Richard, what future use cases do you foresee for reasoning engines, particularly in the context of crypto?
Yeah, it's really, that's a good question, actually. I think like reasoning is like really general. And so the question is, what is the most valuable thing that we can do with reasoning? And it's probably to generate like business value, I would say. I've been diving into the literature on like business processes, business workflows, and thinking about how we can use reasoning in a lot of these. So I think, just like in a lot of different processes that we do day to day, maybe like making decisions about things, all these sorts of things are really interesting, especially for DAOs, right?
Great answer. Okay. So we have about 2 minutes, so we'll use the time to welcome everybody who's just joined. Thank you very much, Richard. It was great to hear from you again. And it's really cool to keep diving even further into this stuff. I like how we're building on what we've already talked about. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so Next up, I will have David Vorick, who I'll bring up now. Hi, David. How are you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Maybe you could give us a little intro to what your talk will be about. You've got about a minute.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about merging crypto and LLMs, and specifically, I've identified 4 use cases or 4, ways that the two might blend together, and so I'll just be giving a brief overview of all 4 of those, and then we're working ourselves on the first one, and then the other 3 are kind of more future facing.
Okay, cool. Can I put your slides up?
Yeah, let's go for it. Cool. So, hey everyone, my name's David. I've been in the crypto space for 12 years. I joined crypto because I thought that it was a revolutionary technology and had a lot of potential to change the world. I was also really fascinated by the idea of money without a bank. And I've started, following LLMs for the same reason, because I think they're a fascinating technology with huge potential to change the world. So, like I said, I've prepared kind of 4 sort of ways that I see LLMs moving forward, moving crypto forward, and crypto moving LLMs forward. So the first one, and I think it's one that we can do today quite successfully, and it's one that we intend to incorporate into our new protocol. So just quick aside, I'm working on a new protocol called Glow. It's a carbon credit protocol on the blockchain, and that's not really important. What is important is that crypto today is often super inaccessible, especially a lot of the advanced knowledge. There aren't that many blog posts that explain crypto and how it works, but there are lots of Discord channels, IRC channels, mailing lists, Telegram channels, where users are having high quality discussions. And so what we could do with LLMs is we can scrape all of this data, and we can feed it into an LLM as training data, and then we can produce an LLM that understands these advanced topics and advanced protocols, and especially if they're like recording conference events, reading papers, we can make it a lot easier for users to learn about LLMs. And this slide mentions something called digestion. Especially if you're doing something like Telegram or Discord, there's a lot of garbage and a lot of misinformation, or a lot of people confidently explaining how something works and being wrong. And so you can actually clean this up in an automated way. Once you've done like one pass of training on an LLM, it has a pretty good idea of what's right and what's wrong. And so you can, and like who's an expert and who's not an expert. And so you can go through your individual bits of training data, and you can prompt it with questions like, okay, how accurate is this information? Where are the inaccuracies? Like what are extended questions we should be asking? And then you can actually really significantly improve the quality of the data and reduce the LLM's like propensity to hallucinate. And so, yeah, I would say like the first thing that we should be doing in crypto is using LLMs to make education a lot easier. I think it's a big opportunity, and we're not waiting for new technology. We can do this with like, the 13 billion and 30 billion parameter LLMs that are openly available today. And there are at this point LLMs with commercial licenses. Open commercial entities can use them without paying any license fees. It's fully open source. So the second opportunity, which is like a little bit further in the future and I think a little more challenging, is to use LLMs, like integrate them into wallets as a form of user guidance. And so I'll use Handshake as an example. Some crypto protocols require basic game theory knowledge to execute well. And Handshake has this like auction mechanism where if you want to purchase a domain name, say like for yourself, you have to engage in a game theoretically fair auction. However, it's only a fair auction if you, as the person bidding in the auction, understand enough game theory to bid correctly. There's like a right approach and a wrong approach. And even though it doesn't require that much understanding, it's like, a 60-second explainer and a user can get it. In the wild, my observation has been that somewhere between 80% and 90% of Handshake users actually get the game theory incorrect. And so Handshake is even more vulnerable to like scams and scalping and malicious behavior than the traditional internet or the traditional way that domains happen. And it's not because the protocol is bad, it's because the users are not using it correctly. And so we can fix this by putting an LLM in the middle and guiding users. And like if they see a bid, it's like, oh, hey, I realized you're trying to buy your own name and you only bid 35 cents. Maybe you should bid like $10 or $15. And the chances are you're only going to end up paying 40 cents, but you really should increase your bid because this is clearly important to you. And so even as someone who understands game theory very well and played the handshake auction, knowing the game theory, knowing what I was supposed to do, I also bid incorrectly and lost my own name. And that's when I realized, like, wait, this stuff, even though it's in theory, it's very simple. Like in practice, you just forget the way that you're supposed to behave. And so handshake is not the only example. There are a lot of protocols that have like bidding or auctions or like game theory strategy that you have to know. And if we use LLMs, we can level up the average quality of user interaction, and that will allow us to reach for even more complex protocols that require a lot heavier game theory. So the third kind of opportunity that I see, and this is a lot more in the future, LLMs need to get more sophisticated, and blockchain design needs to get more sophisticated. But decentralized protocols like Bitcoin depend on social consensus. So the major example would be in the event of a 51% attack, the assumption is that the network will hard fork or users will just abandon Bitcoin. And so it becomes very expensive to do a 51% attack on Bitcoin because you have these like ASICs that become useless. But that like defense of saying like, if you attack Bitcoin, Bitcoin will just turn itself to ash. That defense requires users to understand how they're supposed to respond to the attack. And again, the correct action is not always obvious. And as we saw with like UASFs, as we saw with SegWit and some of the like Bitcoin block size wars, there's lots of misinformation. There's lots of ways to mislead users that aren't experts on the situation. And it can be very difficult for a user to figure out the correct thing to do. So what we can do is we can insert LLMs that understand the social dynamics that are required to keep a blockchain stable. And if every full node is paired with an LLM that's making trading decisions or hard fork decisions or et cetera on behalf of the user, we can potentially level up the blockchain design significantly. So today, it's largely considered like a bad idea to have social elements in your blockchain, or to minimize the social elements as much as possible, because you just can't expect users to make the correct decisions. And when push comes to shove, there's going to be, a huge blitzkrieg of misinformation, attackers intentionally trying to guide users to, make the wrong decision and defend the attacker rather than defend the honest network. And LLMs in the middle are potentially a way to resolve this. And then that allows us to make blockchains that lean more heavily on mass social behavior. And again, this is not something we could probably do in the next 2 or 3 years. We need more development on both the LLM side and the blockchain side. But I think it's a very bright potential future, and that there's a lot of opportunity here. The final one is reverse. So my first 3 were all how LLMs can help crypto. This one's how crypto can help LLMs. So for the most part, decentralized training is just very difficult. Training is super expensive and it doesn't scale horizontally well. You need like, $300,000 worth of hardware to participate in a training run. And so that makes it difficult to create crypto protocols that can meaningfully help LLMs on the training side. However, what we can do is we can use crypto to incentivize the creation of synthetic data. And a lot of the latest models, especially in the past month and a half, have all been using prompts to generate synthetic data from GPT-4 or other similar LLMs, and basically refine a small amount of input data that's low quality into a large amount of training data that is high quality. And this sort of process can actually be done on, like, say, $1,000 GPU. So it's a lot more accessible for people at home. It scales horizontally. You can refine 1 million pieces of training data across 1 million different GPUs, and those GPUs don't have bandwidth overheads the way that they would for decentralized training. And so I see a future where you could use crypto to help create large open source synthetic data sets that make LLMs considerably smarter. So yeah, that's it. Those are like the 4 ideas that I wanted to bring to the talk today, and I'm happy to open the floor for questions.
Cool. So thank you for that. That's really interesting. I especially like the idea of having someone to talk to you in the form of an LLM as you're going through a potentially difficult process, or maybe you're about to do something that's counterintuitive, which, frequently we get through these flows and there's one thing that's a little bit different about this one, but we get into that automatic clicking behavior and we end up like maybe authorizing something that we don't want to, or doing the exact opposite of what we intended. So I like the idea of I think the chat model is quite natural for that. We can answer that. Something I was wondering along those lines is when you were training, if you were to train an LLM for these different use cases, how do you think it might be different for one versus another? Would they have similar training to guide someone through those, or how specific would they need to be? And what do you think the process for providing the good answers to the model before you let it go live?
Yeah, so I think that in general, LLMs just benefit from having more high quality data. So as you increase the footprint, any project that's creating good training data for LLMs, you can just take all of that and put it all into one like crypto LLM, or even get it into like the main open source foundational models. And so these models will become useful out of the box. The one exception to that would be if you want the computation to be super cheap. So say you want an LLM running locally on a user's phone, you may want to pare it down from like a 30 billion parameter model, which is pretty smart, to a 1.3 billion parameter model, which they can be smart, but they have to be very narrowly focused. And so that's sort of where you might have like a blockchain specific one where like this model was only trained on Handshake data. It knows almost nothing about anything besides Handshake, but because we've made it so specific, it can be super small, and we can put it on a mobile phone or a mobile wallet and run it locally.
That's great. Yeah, I love the idea of them running locally on your phones. Super cool. So we have a viewer question. Sandeep asks, David, what do you think might be the negative externalities of amplifying synthetic data creation?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the concerns around synthetic data are totally overblown. Basically, we've seen time and time again that, especially over the past 3 months, that synthetic data tends to be considerably higher quality than human data, even when you're going around the like same topic or idea. Humans are lazy, and LLMs can be trained not to be lazy, and so every single answer is super high quality and thorough. And I genuinely believe that LLMs are capable of like high order reasoning and logic. And if you give it a prompt, and you can see this, if you give it a prompt and you ask it like, does this contain inaccuracies? Can you fix them? Like we're trying to make training data for another LLM. Can you make the highest quality training data possible? It will respond and it will create high quality training data for you. And so I actually think that the fear that if we build the entire world on synthetic data, you kind of go in these weird directions, and like crappy data builds on crappy data and you just get nonsense. I don't think that happens. I think the LLMs are smart enough to realize if they're building crap on crap, and then to stop and to fix it. And yeah, so I actually think synthetic data is like going to be the entire future.
Along those lines, Peter has a similar kind of question that you're sort of touching on. How do we establish accountability of LLMs so it doesn't end up tricking the user through a hallucination or lie?
Yeah, so I mean, you have to remember that any human interacting with any other human is also going to be dealing with lies and hallucinations, and a lot of times with humans, it's like totally unintentional. For example, I'll use Monero. Monero is one where people will talk confidently about the properties of the system or the way that it works, and they'll be very incorrect. And if an LLM was doing that, we would call it a hallucination and be very frustrated. But since humans are doing that, we just call them dumb. But the thing is that they're not dumb; they're just misinformed. And I think LLMs, again, tend to outperform humans. And so as long as the users are aware that the LLMs are capable of hallucinating, I think that a well-trained LLM will hallucinate, quote unquote, less than an equivalent human would. And that, you just have to accept that that's a limitation, but the smarter the LLM is, the less it's going to come up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. That concept was a big unlock for me when I realized just how much incorrect information I deal with from my interpretation and humans. Like, the problem is not the source of the information. It's a problem with the information itself. Cool. So thank you very much, David. That was really interesting. I'm going to switch over to our next speaker right now, but thanks a lot. Okay. So I'd like to introduce Christian Casazza. Christian, you're joining us from Ocean Protocol. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thanks for having me.
So maybe you could give us a little intro to what you're going to talk about. You've got about a minute, and then we can put your slides up.
Oh, cool. Sorry. Cool. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of Ocean Protocol and their ability to kind of tokenize any data or AI assets, and why tokenizing it can lead to kind of greater capital structures for financing this AI space, and why kind of this ability for crypto to unlock new types of capital structures will be kind of more of one of the silver bullets for kind of adoption of crypto and AI. So I can share my screen. Can you see my screen?
I'll just go ahead and hit present.
Oh, got it.
And then I can add them to the layout.
I think I'm sharing, right?
Yes, you are.
Perfect. Awesome. So cool. So starting off today. So what is Ocean Protocol? Well, it's an open source protocol for on-ramping data and AI assets to crypto rails. We provide a different suite of tools for being able to transact and kind of within this ecospace between being able to tokenize your assets and then being able to have a framework for running computation on them while preserving privacy. Today, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the ability to tokenize your assets with Ocean Protocol. So the basic way you can think about it is when we take an NFT as a vehicle to represent one-of-one ownership. And so your decentralized identifier will represent an asset. Such it could be a data set, it could be a model, it could be an API endpoint, it could be an S3 bucket, just anything that can represent an asset, it's stored there. Then the DDO information, this will involve all the information such as who is the owner, what type of license is attached to it, what are the credentials needed to access it. All the information that are related to ownership of an asset is stored and encrypted directly on the NFT using it as a vehicle. And now in order to be able to share and share access to that, you can use data tokens, which are ERC20s. And so this allows for creating flexible sublicenses against the same asset. So that's, for example, you can create one with a commercial license where you can download it for 7 days for $100. Or you might want to make it so a commercial license where for 1 day you can run computations on it. Or you might want to have another license where you can download it for free, but only for non-commercial purposes and for research only. And so it allows for flexible things for the same asset. And so the cool thing about this is it really allows kind of like having a infrastructure where we're repurposing NFTs and ERC20 standards to have flexible models for representing ownership and then being able to share that ownership away. And so what's really cool about this is it really kind of allows an on-ramp of any type of Web2 digital asset for data and AI to be on-ramp to the world of crypto. And what's that really interesting is because we're not reinventing a standard from scratch, but really using existing ones such as NFTs and ERC20s, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So how do can an individual user control access to their own data or their applications? Just use a crypto wallet. How can a group of people all share in the upside of being able to kind of as they pull data together in order for training models? You create a DAO using existing multi-sig wallets and go from there. And so you don't have to. A lot of the existing DeFi infrastructure we can immediately apply to your assets you've tokenized. So that can be and that gets really cool as you start to see kind of how much infrastructure is already there for this industry. So data provenance, another interesting point where, okay, how can I determine what type of data set this model is fine-tuned on or trained on? Well, you can just use existing tools like Etherscan to really be able to check the transactions of, okay, this model was trained by being able to trace, it was created from these data assets. And so you can start to really leverage the existing ecosystem of DeFi. And so why is this really important? Well, I would say that being able to kind of tokenize it with Ocean of assets to existing standards such as NFTs and ERC20s allows you to repurpose DeFi and really start to unlock new capital structures for financing this AI space. So what does that mean exactly? Let's go through one example. So we're going to talk about a use case for getting data sets, high quality data sets for fine-tuning open source models. So today, the most dominant models, GPT-4, PaLM, they're all very large closed source models that require a huge unstructured data set and a ton of compute in order to build it. So the idea can be, okay, we're never going to be able to compete with these massive closed source models because how can an open source model raise the money needed to compute at such a high level? However, recent evidence is showing that might not necessarily be the case for applications. For example, in the Phi 1 that was recently released, we're starting to see how really data quality can be much more of the determination for how good of a model is compared to the compute or any modeling techniques you may do. So they show that by able to curate a very high quality data sets, whereas more explained it almost like you would a human, like kind of textbook and examples, even though they were using a small model, a small amount of compute relative to the closed source models, they're able to have dramatic improvement increases for that. And so I believe what this can really show that in this space, by being able to access high quality data sets from curated industry professionals, open source will be able to compete with the massive compute that closed source companies will be able to provide. However, there's a very key problem with the scenario, as we're going to need high quality data sets for every industry and niche around the world. The question is, how do you incentivize that high quality data set creation? Because when you go through it, there are a few problems. So what you can do is, okay, maybe I want to curate a data set for legal or for kind of any specific PR. So you may pay industry professionals to label the data directly, or an employer might try to make their employees do it, like Databricks did with Dolly. Or maybe we'll just believe that the open source community will step up and people will voluntarily just create this high quality data sets and make it available for free. However, in practicality, this probably is not going to be the case. For one, as we start to have to hire already industry professionals, such as in software development and kind of legal, they are already making a lot of money. And so being able to pay them at a fixed rate might not be that attractive, especially when you consider that these employees that they're kind of labeling the data, they're really automating themselves out of future jobs, as people that retain ownership of that data set will be able to create much more downstream value by training a model on it. And then lastly, the incentives of open source are just very difficult because any closed source company will be able to easily take and utilize any open source any open source data sets or software released. So the question is how can you, and so you can start to see this with Scale AI, one of the top leading people for kind of labeling data sets. They're asking software engineers for $25 an hour in order to start creating data sets. And they want this fixed rate because the outlay they pay up front is going to be far less compared to the long-term value of having a data set they can use to have their own models that they can replace software engineering and enhance them in the future. So the question is, how can you help solve this incentive problem? One way is with data DAOs. And so you can easily spin up a data DAO today with kind of the existing infrastructure. You can kind of mint a data set with an Ocean NFT and tokenize it around a multi-sig, which allows people to share ownership of that asset. You can attach licenses to it that were similar to the kind of original Falcon one, requiring a percentage of downstream revenue created from it. Or you can create many different type of licenses depending on the price you want to have. And so then with that, you can really leverage existing crypto infrastructure for financing that. So that's really cool, where now instead of having to create a data set, individuals, even about 10 of them, can come together, create a very high quality data set, and then for their specific niche, and then they can start to have very flexible payment options. They can have perpetuity payments from downstream models, or they can make it, okay, you don't have to pay up front, but you have a percentage of revenue until a certain number is reached as a cap off. You can also use smart contracts like wallets to really have a hierarchy of who gets paid different amounts. So this really helps the servicing terms because of crypto. And so this really kind of creates things for multiple parties, or for data labelers are incentivized to do this because now instead of having a one-time cost up front, they're getting passive income. They'll be able to and take part in the downstream revenue of their work in exchange for transferring their knowledge to AI. And then for being able to service that, they can easily, instead of having to connect many different bank accounts and trust a singular person to handle paying everyone, they can just use a simple wallet and have trustless like data revenue sharing amongst their work. So people from different countries, different people that don't really need to trust each other very well can come together and create high quality data sets. For businesses, this is very big because they'll be able to kind of avoid upfront capital investments in order to pay for their stuff. And they can have significantly increased regulatory compliance and servicing by having proof of where they got their data from. And so with this, you start to have a really cool data value creation loop where people that create the data can take part in the upside and earn additional profits, which can then go back to making better models, which creates more data, which go then back to the original creators, creating a sustainable loop. And this is really just the start of what you can do now with kind of access to greater capital with tokenized assets represented by NFTs and ERC20s. We'll be able to start having cool aspects such as pulling investment from individuals to kind of lock up and pay for the compute for training models, allowing them to kind of, again, take part in downstream upside. Instead, for fast-growing AI startups, instead of locking up their cash, like having to pay for kind of the inference costs for their customers, they can have that financed and so allow them to use their capital for kind of more growth initiatives like expanding or fine-tuning. And for fast-growing startups, they'll be able to fund their marketing costs by having proof of their success on-chain. With revenue-based financing, people can easily loan to a wallet and then directly plug into their smart contract to be able to service that loan. So just to conclude for this, the reason I believe that capital is kind of a silver bullet for crypto and AI adoption is because we'll be able to, because once the more and more things that happen on chain, the more easy it is to compose different types of financial products to finance it. And so while all the kind of more direct first order effects of why crypto and AI are obvious, such as provenance and kind of the ability for identities and knowing what is real and what's real, the second order effect of once everything is on chain, you could have much stronger capital financing products attached to it. That second order effect will be one of more of the bigger silver bullets for crypto and AI adoption. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Christian. That's really interesting. So we have a couple of minutes for questions. First, I have one from Sandeep who asks for the paper that you cited on data quality over quantity.
Cool. I found the exact link for it. It was a recent one where they kind of trained a smaller model. But what they did was like really high, it curated the data set in a much higher way where they made it more like a textbook where not only did they provide examples, but they had high annotations explaining what exactly was happening in the code, what decisions they were making. So they kind of almost like how a textbook is better suited for learning from a human because it has both examples and instructions. The same thing was applied to the kind of fine-tuning this model. And so even though it had a small model, it had really outperformed compared to similar sized models because of higher data quality. And yeah, exactly. Kind of like Mechanical Turk on steroids from Katie Rush is a good example, where now instead of like having a middleman kind of managing that, people can directly take advantage and create new type of products that fit them.
Yeah, that's great. So I have maybe a kind of an open-ended question that maybe you could touch on. So the theme for our last event was setting standards for interoperability, and a lot of what you talked about made it quite clear that there's different incentives when you have open source models and open source tools, but then closed businesses that stand to make a profit from them. So in our space, I think we often are prioritizing open source, and that matters a lot to us. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about interoperability and setting standards, and what you think we could do to maybe keep the strengths of open source, but also be able to have a kind of rich ecosystem of actors pursuing their own goals.
Right. So in terms of standards, I think that NFTs really provide a really great package for representing ownership, and so that already has great tooling around it. And ERC20 is kind of create a really great way for flexible different stuff. So I think the key for managing that trade-off between open source and like still commercial value is to have multiple flexible licenses. Allow open source, and then with a license that like, okay, this is only for academic value, so you can download it for free. But anyone that does has to follow a credential check, and so if they leak it, they are liable for kind of like any leakage. While also having another license for commercial, where okay, now you can kind of use this for commercial value, but now you need to pay certain rights. And so I don't think it will be only one license for every asset where, okay, this is either open source for free or this is closed source and commercial. there'll need to be flexibility between, okay, for academic purposes, this is open source so people can do research. But then also if you want to use it for commercial purposes, you need to use this license and get it from here. And being able to have all that provenance of who's using what license directly on chain will be kind of the key to have for like providing that.
Awesome. I think Jason H has mentioned TC 307 standards. I'm not familiar with those.
I'm also not familiar with that.
Oh, it's an ISO standard, blockchain and distributed ledger technologies, decentralized identity standard for the identification of subjects and objects.
Oh, cool. Exactly. Stuff like that, where it's like now everyone, since we're all working on the similar substrate with like using crypto and all that, we'll be able to kind of leverage identity standards, like stuff being built on ceramic and all there. For, okay, now I can lock in for data labelers. They can kind of show, okay, from my wallet, I'm credentialing, I have software experience, I have a doctorate. So the data sets they create will have much higher trust and higher quality. Okay, this is not just garbage. This was created by a person with a high level of knowledge in the field.
Cool. All right, so we're going to go to break, but maybe you can quickly answer Holly's question. Holly asks, are there any modules being built on Safe that show how DataDAO users can share their data and track their submissions?
Not currently, but something we're kind of looking in development. I'm really hoping to plan something around this at a hackathon and EFCC. And so the kind of tooling has always been there to do this. And so now we're looking to help kind of bring 2 and 2 together in EFCC. So anyone that might be interested in spinning up their own data DAOs or really come together and start creating high quality data sets for coding, like legal, really anything you guys are interested in, let's meet up at EFCC and start building this together.
Right on. Okay, thank you, Christian. That's a very interesting presentation and a great discussion as well.
Thanks, guys.
Let's pick up our next speaker. Hello, how's it going, Jiahao?
Very well, yeah. How are you?
Awesome. Cool. So we're just at about the time to switch into your talk. So I'll just let you start with your intro and slides right now.
Okay, yeah. I'm just wondering. Oh, yeah. Okay. This platform is cool. You can upload your slides and then it goes directly to your screen. So anyway, hi everyone. My name is Jiahao, CEO of Flock. So well, because of the origin of the angle this company is doing, so actually we're quite interested in the large language models developed in recent year. And the company Flock, we actually incorporated last year in April, where at that time, nobody was talking about large language model. At that time, what we were thinking about is how to, ensure the privacy of user data, but still can collaboratively learn a model together with decentralized devices or edges from different places, right? So it's already a traditional emerging technology in AI. It's called federated learning, FL, and then we add blockchain to it because we want it to be decentralized. That's why we have this name Flock. It's a pun, right? It's a combination of federated learning, blockchain, Flock. So yeah, and well, the vision of the company that what we're trying to do is to have those data to machine learning dividends. Well, what it means that, okay, so basically when you do the machine learning training, especially for these large language models or large models that you're going to fine tune, you're gonna use up a lot of data from very various different places, and then how to make it a more fair process by using blockchain. See, how can I do next slide? Oh, do it here. Okay, cool. So basically, yeah. So the angle that we're looking at this problem is data today fuels the machine learning development, of course, right? We know large language model and they use up a lot of data, and also but still big tech, they control the whole training process, they control the whole data, and they control all the evaluation process, even though they need a lot of people to do human reinforcement for them to do the evaluation, but still everything is on their control. That's why there are 2 different angles of the problem that we're tackling. First of all, is the data privacy. So it's within our within the data that we send over to GPT, basically 1 in 3 data that we send over are like privacy concern or even PII data, right? And also, what's even worse is the amount of data that GPT can train over public data domain is only a tip of iceberg, because majority of the data is actually behind the water, basically your private data, because they can't train on your clinical records, right? They can't train on your private or chat history, because those things are not online. So what that means that what's public on the network will become more those voices will become louder when it goes to training in a general language model. So that bias will be amplified because that's the only voice they can hear heard. So basically, the voices that can be heard will always be heard, and then your voice maybe never have your presence on internet. Then the model wouldn't pick it up. So it can't be, it cannot represent everyone. And even for those evaluation, of course, they hire from their own regions, right? But they can't represent all the cultures because basically they don't have that culture diversity in their selection, let's say. So that's for the data privacy. So the data privacy is not only just for the privacy of yourself, but also for this unbiased model training in the future that we want to tackle. And secondly, for the profit sharing, which is quite a thing, because last month we all know the fact that Reddit trying to charge their API, right? Why do they do that? It's because GPT generally was trained a lot on Reddit data. They crawled it and get the Reddit data, and that API is free as well, anyways. So they train a lot on the data, and then OpenAI earn a lot of money, but nothing for Reddit, right? So Reddit is just a free lunch for everyone. The people post content there, and then third party took those contents, make training of their own of those data. So they don't really get those rewards by contributing those data to any training process. And also, regarding their evaluation, as I said, right, it's all controlled and then controlled by big tech, and they probably only pay like $2 per hour for people to evaluate whether this sentence is correct or wrong, right? So this whole process is not it's not a fair process, and then people who contributed are not getting what they deserve to reward. That's why we want to empower the data holders and then do the data monetization in a privacy preserving way, where in the traditional world, you still need a general model. You still need a big tech maybe stand in the middle to do the training facilitation for you guys, because that's how Google call it. Google 2017, Google called out this technology, federated learning. So today, everyone who is using Pixel phone, Google's already using your typing history to predict your next your next words or your typing habits, right? So it's quite a industry practice for Google now. But I think about this, they can only do it on Google Pixel phones. Why can't they do it across with iPhones, with Motorola or Samsungs, right? Because those manufacturers, they wouldn't believe in Google, right? They can't just step in to say, oh yeah, let's join a training together. I can give up all our authentication. You can use our data. You say that you're gonna keep our privacy. You are using federated learning. So yes, I believe you. No, right? So there's no way that you can trust a third party who say they are trustworthy, right? So that's why we have blockchain join. So every training party joining this network will become one of the node in this consensus, in this decentralized security. So yeah, we don't have to have some big brother stand in the middle, say, oh, I'm facilitating the whole training process. Everyone's being genuine. Okay, you are getting 10,000 reward, you are getting 1,000 reward. So everything is then well tracked, alongside the model training and everything, and go all the way to the end user who actually contributed to this model, even this model weights updates, right? So yeah, so basically we are doing this in our own way. So what we call machine learning in a flock way. So we have traditional federated learning. They are cool already, right? But they have their origin, let's say the origin issues. That's because they require the central node to facilitate everything. So not only Google, there are many traditional federated learning companies already, like in healthcare, like in other sectors, but they can only run within their own jurisdiction, because any other player who want to join the training, they'll have a huge doubts about, okay, whether I can really believe you, even if you say you are using federated learning, right? Because I can't see it. So that's why we have our POS, proof of stake joint, which we published a paper last year at New Rips. It's the top AI conference. Well, together with we have Richard here as well. Yeah, we both published there, and we won the best paper award. We talked about the malicious clients thing. So if it's a controlled environment with a big browser, so of course they can select good players and make sure the training is within his good bodies, right? But once you have a public training process, then there will be malicious guys join. There will be people who just want to steal your model. There will be people who just want to play evil, right? So how to conquer that? In traditional federal learning, if the malicious rate goes to 40%, basically 40% of them are evil guys, then the accuracy will decrease all the way to 70%. But then in Flockway, we have experiments and proof. Even if there are 40% of them are random guys who just playing evil, then we can still keep our industry standard accuracy at 96%. So that's our kind of innovation way how to tackle this, and why we're adding blockchain into federal learning. We're not just adding it for the sake of adding it. It's because this is solving the problem. So, and also of course it lowers barrier to monetize data. Everyone with their own machine can join the network. So we are actually going to launch our private large language model, localized private large language model plug-in into your browser, where you can see clearly your data never goes out of your browser, your own sandbox, but that model can then be fine-tuned to your own interest. You don't need to worry about you sending any data to OpenAI. It's gonna be next week, and for this week, of course, we have our beta launch of Block Network itself. And then that's for the tokenomics and the team, and doesn't really affects this talk today. I'll just stop it here, and thank you everyone. If you have any questions, let me know.
Cool. So that's very interesting. We'll give an opportunity for some of our live viewers to maybe ask a question. Let me check the chat. If you want to send a question that's visible in text, you can do that in the stage tab and the chat sub tab of that. I understand it's a little bit difficult. We have two different chat channels with two sub channels, and it's a little bit confusing. But if you place them in chat under stage, I'll be able to read them out loud. And maybe I can throw something that your talk made me think about. You mentioned that, what was the percentage of people you said using ChatGPT who had privacy concerns?
Oh, that number was 1 in 3, meaning that
1 in 3?
1 in 3 of your data that you send over to OpenAI is actually your privacy data, but you just
something that maybe we should think more about. Okay, well, I'll pause my question so we can make sure we have time for this viewer question. Do you think that there is a lot of untapped compute ever since Ethereum has moved from proof of work to proof of stake? I feel that there will be a transition towards utilizing all of these GPUs for LLM models.
Oh, yes. I guess that's what the previous speaker just talked about, decentralized training, right? Yes. So when actually, some of our investors, when they are reaching out to us, they were very, very much interested in this area, because there are a huge amount of those ASICs and GPUs they just left over, and then they want to look for a use case in the next, let's say, a next golden age, if there is, right? So definitely that can be a very interesting topic that many of us like entrepreneurs should be thinking about. And machine learning is really a place where that computation is not wasted, right? So if POW, let's say, if it's wasted as it's just calculating some prime numbers, but machine learning itself, at least we can get a model that's useful.
Yeah, well, that would be great. Jason H asks, would it be a good partnership to partner with a decentralized neural network? And are there synergies in decentralized neural networks with Flock?
Oh, well, of course, for the concept, of course, certainly we're happy to partnership with them. But then, in reality, the computation, the efficiency at this stage is still not good yet, right? So whether we can deploy that decentralized neural network in an efficient way that actually can solve business use cases, that's still a question mark. But for vision in the future, of course, that's somewhere that we really want to dive into, right? And Sandip just say, I remember the paper, it was a short one. Yes, That's a short one. Yeah, we have a yes. So the short one goes only the design of the system and also the mechanism, and the full paper with experiments and everything is now just under review. So once it passed the review process, we will have them open very soon. So it's publishing in a journal, a very big one. So, and also there's 2 more of our papers following this year. So yeah.
Cool. Look forward to checking those out when they come out. So we have a couple more minutes. So yeah, I'll kind of return to what I was going to follow on in my original kind of inquiry around privacy concerns. I'm wondering if you could talk about like what you think the effective narratives are for talking to people about these privacy concerns, because I feel that often people expose themselves to privacy risks that they don't know why they should care about them, and that's often like a
and in
communication
exchange
problem.
for some convenience, right? So
Yeah,
I think
exactly,
there's a
exactly.
very big saying. Yeah, so I'm just compromising some of my privacy, but what I get is a huge convenience.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's true. That's why so majority of our current relationships that our already established relationships are with finance and healthcare. So those are the industries where nobody will say, yes, it's okay, right? So it's definitely something very sensitive. So that's our go-to-market strategy as well. So we go with the highly sensitive industry first. But of course, for chat history, someone would think, it's fine, man. So
Yeah.
if you think so,
that's fine until it's not fine, right?
Yeah.
So something I've seen recently is a friend of mine was approached by a company looking for a developer to work on a therapy-based LLM, and I mean, people are using LLMs as therapists already, so they're going to do it no matter what. But there's all of these different I mean, maybe attack vector is the wrong word, but like these spaces where you're trading away more than you expect. Well, thank you very much. That was really interesting, and I really enjoyed the answers to the questions. Okay, so I've got to take you down now, and I'll bring up João. Hi, João.
Hey, everyone. How's it going? Thanks, Thomas. It's a pleasure to meet everyone.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll let you put your slides up, and I'll take myself down.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do it.
Okay.
Alrighty. Okay, so let's get started. Hey, everybody. My name is João Fiadeiro. I'm a product lead at Jump Crypto, and I am going to discuss a couple of things that I've been exploring, mostly in my spare time, actually, as someone who has a background in AI/ML and sort of made their way to Web3. I've obviously seen the explosion of language models and was very curious about their application into something that I've been working very close at Jump, which is security research. And so today I'm going to discuss a few ideas, a few things that I've been thinking about on kind of how we can really leverage AI to make Web3 safer. So the problem, projects keep getting wrecked, right? If you go to the Wreck leaderboard, it's an amazing website that kind of keeps track of all these instances. You'll see that since late September 2020, there's been about $4.7 billion US dollars in hacks resulting from security vulnerabilities. Now, 21% of those hacks happened on audited protocols. The rest happened on unaudited protocols. This is an issue both for those that have been audited and those who have not been audited. And so we need to find a solution because everyone gets wrecked. It's not just the protocols. More importantly, it's the users and it's the entire industry that loses trust in us. Now, the really big problem here is that audits are slow, laborious, and expensive. And maybe they should be, right? Like, of course, if you're sort of getting a contractor to install a new roof, you don't want it to be the cheapest, fastest thing ever. There's some sort of benefit here of their things being intentional. But the problem is that because it's so slow, you often have a huge lead time. You obviously, have early stage protocols that can't afford $100,000 audits from, top tier security firms. And so sometimes they shrug and they say, okay, well, let's just go to market. And that's definitely not good, right? Because as I said, it puts everyone at risk. And so, the insight here is maybe we can automate certain parts of the process. I don't want to replace security auditors with some complete LLM-based automation, but maybe there are aspects of the workflow that can be significantly improved. For instance, right, you start understanding the target code base, right? You have to have a very deep, thorough analysis of the code, the source code, and really understand the business logic. there's a lot there that we can leverage LLMs for in terms of, code understanding and code summarization, things like that. But then security researchers go on to write unit tests. They conduct static analysis, other formal methods. They use fuzzing, code clone analysis, all sorts of things that really are sort of a hodgepodge of techniques strung together in, some sort of hacky scripts most of the time. And sort of you end up, and obviously the output of all that has to be presented in a nice structured, clean report for your clients with, recommended next steps and mitigation strategies. So there's a lot here that we can actually start breaking down and think about where we can either improve performance in terms of speed or performance in terms of accuracy where powered by LLMs. Now, how do we actually use LLMs? This is actually something that's pretty contentious, right? Just today, I saw a tweet where someone was like, screen capping some project that just proudly said that they use the GPT-4 audit, right? Now, that's not the approach that protocols should take. This is really, really dangerous. And that's actually only going to cause even more mistrust between Web3 practitioners and AI practitioners. Early explorations were actually pretty discouraging. People from top tier firms like Trail of Bits, for example, did a pretty thorough analysis of GPT-4 in the context of security research, and you have a few others, and unfortunately the results were not great. But my hypothesis here is that there's a lot that has improved both in the models themselves, but also in the techniques that can help us point this research avenue in a much more productive direction. So, for instance, some folks out of Berkeley and Imperial College and UCL just published this, I think a couple of days ago. Arthur Gervais did a sort of more thorough analysis of how to use LLMs to at least qualify whether a specific smart contract might have an issue, as opposed to what exactly is the issue and how to fix it. And so we're seeing people have a much more robust approach that I'll sort of, I'll go through a couple of interesting methods into sort of understanding how we can, augment the intelligence of those security experts that have really a lot on their plate when they have, back-to-back audits stacked on their to-do list. So models are improving. This isn't a surprise to anyone in this particular call. The context windows in particular are increasing dramatically, right? So once you have these models that have, let's say, up to 100,000 tokens in the context window, you can actually start doing crazy things like just inputting the entire code base. And that actually allows, presumably, some much more insightful analysis from the model in terms of understanding the entire business logic, as opposed to just looking at a specific Solidity contract in isolation. Underlying models are actually trained on much more relevant data. For instance, StarCoder, which was a project by Hugging Face, they took a fairly significant data set from much more recent stuff from GitHub that includes things that are relevant to Web3 engineers, like Move, for instance, right? These new languages, and started coding or actually implementing new models that deal with such data in a much better way. Of course, the ability to fine-tune models on new data is becoming easier and easier by the day. And then something I particularly like is how can you actually use LLMs in the data engineering part, right? How can I actually take all these audits that are out there and they're open by default, but they're in PDFs? How can I use something like LangChain to just scrape a whole bunch of these audits and create some structured data sets that I can then use either for fine-tuning or for like few shot prompt engineering. The techniques are improving too, right? This is, I think, really crucial. This is actually from an upcoming paper from some folks doing a company called Metatrust that I think is very insightful, right? Like they understand that there are limitations both on static code analysis and GPT models. And the combination of both can actually produce a sum greater than the parts. And so the idea here isn't just naively putting in a whole bunch of code and seeing what it spits out, regardless of how sophisticated your prompts are. The idea here is to combine a few different types of inputs and sort of leverage the advantages of both types of I guess outputs from a code basis and from the static analysis that can actually produce more reliable reports with fewer false positives. Of course, there's everything else that people are exploring, right? Like how can we potentially have some adversarial LLM-based agents, right? Like I have in my particular prototype one sort of prompt that produces a report, and another prompt that is aimed at sort of verifying whether the report is actually correct. Fine-tuning models on domain data, this is obviously the most important thing, not just the fine-tuning part, but actually having some eval data sets. This is also really crucial, just so we understand our progress against the benchmark. And then the usual fun part of smarter prompt engineering and seeing how far we can get with just that. So since I don't have time, I will sort of follow up, hopefully in whatever forum we have, with a link. But I've sort of been playing around with something I'm calling Robocop, which is a proof of concept, right? The idea is, given some public GitHub repo, pull all the code, pull all the markdown files, make sense of them using Claude to understand the business logic, and basically, iteratively construct some fairly sophisticated prompts that basically allow Claude to, look at a specific Solidity contract and examine it for specific vulnerabilities. Things like reentrancy problems, integer overflows, uninitialized variables, and things like that, right? The thing everyone's talking about, though, is like, how do you actually build a defensible business? The thing that I'm sort of really kind of concerned over the next few weeks as I think about potentially doing a startup out of this idea is really introducing some, RLHF here and, partnering deeply with security auditors such that we can actually gain a much more insightful understanding of how the output of such models is actually useful or not. And, we can actually start aligning security researchers and the models in a more robust way. So obviously, how can this be useful, right? Well, we have to believe that at some point we're going to reach really high accuracy, right? Right now, there's issues with false positives. It's a particularly big issue because these are nuanced things in code, and so if a particular false positive takes away 5 minutes of an engineer's time to verify that it is in fact a problem, that's a huge issue. But let's assume that we work through those. Obviously, this is going to leave time to accelerate the workflow. More crucially, it leaves time to do deeper analysis, and ideally, in the long term, allows protocols to self-serve. Again, I'm not saying this would ever be a replacement to a human audit, but hopefully researchers augmented by these tools can provide something that is much cheaper and much faster than the sort of 6-week lead time and $100,000 it costs. A couple of things I'm interested in exploring. Bugs introduced by incremental code changes. This happens all the time. So how can we actually look at the sort of temporal dimension of repos being contributed to by many, many people? On that topic of different people, something I find very interesting is very frequently security researchers will identify a specific contributor that's maybe a little sloppy, and very often they'll find bugs again and again that are due to code contributed by that particular person. And so often it's an interesting sort of starting point to kind of keep pulling that thread and see how far you can get. And so that's one interesting thing. And of course, I'm really interested in exploring methods like reinforcement learning, right? There's a couple of interesting literature out there around using, different methods to sort of essentially create an agent that's supposed to attack a smart contract, essentially by doing some sort of global fuzzing, seeing how far you can push different variables and see where it breaks. And I think RL could be a really interesting idea to do that at scale and perhaps more robustly. I spoke really fast. I threw a lot at you. You know where to find me. You can Telegram me, Twitter me at JWow, and I'll happily answer and collaborate with any folks who are interested in exploring this further. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for that, João. So we have about 3 minutes. We can take questions from our viewers. Check and see if we have any written. I'll read them out so that our watchers of the replay know what the question is and don't just hear the answer. If you want to write a question in text form, please place it into the chat tab of the stage. Katie Bush loved to talk.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah. You can also just share feedback. We love that too. Well, in these last couple of minutes, I'm curious if maybe you could talk a little bit about if and how you would approach prompt engineering differently if you've got, I mean, 1,000 tokens on Claude is absolutely crazy by comparison to the other one. So how does something like that affect how we, I mean, you mentioned giving every single Solidity contract. I mean, that's really, it's hard for me to even imagine how that would change my approach to writing my prompts. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as the context window increases, you can start thinking about adding so many things, because these types of security bugs often arise as not just a combination of the code itself, but the code in the context of whatever virtual machine is running on, right? And so there are ideas of maybe even throwing the entire Ethereum virtual machine into it, and so that it understands really, like, the very complex nuances between the execution environment and the code itself. That's a really interesting thing. If I'm looking at sort of more custom, fine-tuned open source models where I don't have those context windows, I think the interactivity is something really, really crucial. That's the sort of one big insight I'm getting for the security researchers at Jump that I'm talking to. No one necessarily is excited about a single big red button that generates a magical report. The idea is that because this is a very involved process, how can I co-create, right? How can I actually understand with a sort of chat interface what the code is about, understand particular, surface areas that are sort of particularly prone to attacks. And that can be done without a crazy context window, right? I'll be doing that at a specific, maybe at a function level. And so I can leverage all the usual techniques of embeddings and whatnot to sort of work with smaller context windows if necessary. But my expectation is, in a year, those context windows will only be bigger. So, in the spirit of skating where the puck's going, maybe let's just focus on that. That's my mindset.
Cool. So maybe if you can get this one in under a minute. I love this question from David. What about using these tools for real-time detection of attacks in live apps?
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's actually an area that if I were to start a business around this, I would definitely complement the auditing piece with the live continuous monitoring. I think obviously there are a couple of providers out there that are looking at continuous alerting for sketchy transactions that are happening. And I think there's potentially some aspect of LLMs that could be leveraged here, because as we all know, if you've ever tried to sign a transaction on MetaMask and you just see a whole bunch of random stuff, like for example, Wormhole, a project that I contributed to, you're doing all these crazy transactions from, one ecosystem and then bridging it and another ecosystem, and you start getting these like really complex things that are really hard to parse. I saw an article a couple of days ago, I can't remember who wrote it, but they had some really interesting insights of like how to use LLMs as universal translation machines, and basically taking these really hard to parse transaction outputs or right, and then sort of putting them in human readable format for that, so that the end user can actually understand those. But maybe it's not necessarily just the end user. Maybe it's some sort of intermediate agent who makes sense of sketchy transactions happening in real time. It's a really interesting idea, David.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Joao. I'm going to bring on our next speaker now.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm bringing up Sal Vivona. Hello, Sal. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Really glad to have you with us.
Thanks.
So do you have some slides you'd like to put up?
Yeah, I'm actually going to share my screen.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Just hit the present.
Yeah.
And then I'll add you to the layout.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, we've got an infinite one. Yeah, so you maybe want to go.
All
okay,
right.
Cool. That good?
So yeah, let me just go through what I'm trying to solve and like give some quick examples. So essentially, I've been doing this for almost 3 years, and the idea that I've like when I was in the AI space, I kind of found that everything is in fragmented kind of like echo chambers or their own silos in a way. And so even no matter despite the like bravado of open source, they still need a moat to create a business plan. So that incentivizes these echo chambers. So I've been thinking of a way to incentivize something that's a bit like more open and so more interoperable as a result. And what this requires is like a very kind of like a breaking down of like what machine learning is, what are all these things that are happening with agents and stuff. Can you break that down to simple things without changing what we already have, without adding new languages or new terms? So essentially I created like, this network of Python objects where everything can like work out of the box. And so like some examples of this is like, reusability, where maybe you want to have like different people running off of a base model. So you might have a base model that's like very large, maybe very unscalable. And so you would have perhaps up to a certain layer, and then like after that, you would have these personal adapters. So we're obviously going into the adapter economy with like LoRa and like all these other new things that are coming out. Also, like what HiveMind's doing, like they fraction large language models vertically. So right, if you want a multi-trillion parameter model and maybe you don't want it on just one machine, you want to fragment that. So like this whole like, these are two examples of something that's like, really shows like the importance of like reusability and just having those options of like who's out there. So essentially what I've been like developing the past like year or 2 years, I've been off-chain and on-chain stuff. So with our on-chain stuff, basically you have like a namespace that essentially is the name of your module. So like if I go into like here, I want to, let's say I'll have like, I'll be in the command terminal here. So I'll do modules, and then let's see what's running. So it's going to be connected to the chain. And then right now, these are all the modules that are running on chain. Right now, this is the URL it's like an access node to that. So I can connect this from anywhere. Like I can go to my local laptop and here, right? And then I could do the same thing, modules. Oh, I spelled that wrong. So the idea is that for anyone to essentially have this, like, it takes a bit longer, but there we go. And so anyone can connect to this, right? And so like we want people to be able to share and upload whatever they want. And so you might ask, hey, what is a module? So I'll go through an example of what like a module is. So I'm gonna go to like, let's say a demo. Or yeah, so demo. So this is like basically what it is. In fact, this is actually quite an old one. So all you need is this, really. So if I do like, let's say like basically the path of the module is based on like where it is in this like folder here. So if I wanted to add a new module like demo 2, I would just rename this to demo 2. And this doesn't have to be renamed because it's everything that's in the folder with respect to the root directory. So if I want to play with it, I could do like demo hey, calling like this hey function here. And so it says, what up fam? Sure. I can change it a bit if I want. I could do like bro and then, fam, and then I can like do this. So obviously this is a simple example, but like, I have like other modules that essentially like connects to like basically anything. To Stability AI, I have a transformers one that connects to Hugging Face where you can fine tune it. Like you can basically add whatever you can in Python. And that was the whole idea of this whole abstraction here. Like all you would need to do is just literally just do this, and then everything else is handled for you. So in order to deploy this to the network, I just do C register, whatever the name is. And then so demo, I can give it a tag, I don't know, bro. And so it will basically create a unique name, demo bro, and it will see, okay, so it doesn't have it, like it creates a new key that's with that name. And all right, it's served. All right, so let me see if it actually works. So let me just go to a random computer here and see modules, and then let me filter demo, and then make sure the network is subspace. So I'm filtering the model. I just deployed it. Like hopefully it connects, but yeah. So let's see here. All right, sick. So it's there. So now if I want to call it, let me call a function. So call demo bro. I don't know. Let me get, what was the function I called? Hey. Yeah, hey. All right. So if I call hey, it should return how I would call it locally. And so this is all through the command line, right? Like, and so the idea is that you can do, oh, I guess that didn't work. Let me call an actual one that works. So I think, let me see, data set. So essentially, like the idea is that for you to connect to these remotely as you would like locally. So if I think I have a side-by-side screen here. So here's like another way you can view it. Like basically I have all these modules preloaded here, so it just scrapes the folder and it just like chooses whatever you want. So like this is a Hugging Face data set, and so it's running Squad V2. And so if I register it, it will register that to the network. And so anyone can like connect to that and call samples from it. And so like essentially this allows for anyone to connect and collaborate. And you know, we have a chain system as well. So like as you deploy it to this network, we work on a voting system. So like if I go into like what that really is, so you have these modules in a network, and then so they each have a stake, and they all start at 0, right? Like this is a fair launch, so like we all start at 0, and then we all just vote for each other, and you know, as we accrue value or tokens, like depending on, that can be value if you want to consider it as that, but depending on the tokens you get, you can then like vote for other modules as well, and then that distribution of votes every like block time, so every 2 seconds or 4 seconds, you get a token, and that just goes on. And obviously you can have halving if you want, like you can add those features in. We kind of like want the users to have like, we have a proposal mechanism where users propose state changes. So like changing like the block time or like the emissions. And if enough people vote on it, then they essentially get, that change goes past. Like that doesn't require a human in the loop. And ideally we want to maybe have that voting system for more general things. So yeah, that's kind of it. Just creating this like connective layer of like APIs, and we're technically right now in testnet, and we're going to mainnet next maybe week or 2 weeks. We're going to have a vote that transitions our balance sheet from the testnet to the mainnet. If people are cool with it, then like we could keep the tokens we get in the testnet. But if not, then, you know, we can start a fresh, fair new launch. Another thing I want to mention, the last thing is probably the forking mechanism. So this is, we try to be fork resistant by encouraging forks. And so we do this because we believe that like a truly open economy won't be just one token. It's going to be a set of different tokens that each maybe have a different philosophy. And so having this interoperable kind of like modular tool set, similar to how Polkadot and Cosmos let you build blockchains, we want you to help build your own like, you know, open communities. And so we'll be building a community, but, you know, we'll have like, you know, functions for you to create your own like chain without knowing Rust or anything. So we have those tools as well. And obviously we'll have connections to Ethereum. We have like Ethereum modules that can help us actually create these automatic bridges. Not even AI is required. Like you can use like off-chain bridges that are trusted by peers who want to get from assets from one chain to another. We can also use AI to essentially add some spice to that. But, you know, the options are endless basically. And that's it.
Oh, cool. So I'll take your slides down here. So we'll pause now to see if we have any written questions in the chat for you. If you want to submit a question in writing, you can do that on the stage tab under chat, and I can read it out loud so that when we have the replay available, people will know what the question that we asked was.
Yep.
Not just the answer. Okay. Yeah, so I could throw a question to you. What kind of like community of builders do you have like collaborating here?
Yeah, so right now we're really early. So we have around 100 people, and we're actually still technically in like pre-mine / like, I don't know, we're kind of like figuring out the chain, making sure things work. We are trying to attract like builders mostly who develop in Python and who want to publish something and even share their things without having to go you know, it's obviously you don't even need to know any cryptography. We create the key for you. This doesn't require any Google sign-in. All you need to do is run commune as a Python package, like install the repo, and then you can share your module and connect with people. And hopefully, this is the goal, is when we create an Ethereum bridge, we do have liquidity interest from like, you know, some people who are willing to like invest in the project just through these bridges. So that might create a feedback loop where people are mining value from the commune network, but also converting that into Ethereum and then converting that into cash, right? So that we want to make that really quick, where people don't have to go through the commune. Like commune is like a conduit to just building what you want, exposing it, and then we'll give you tokens to it. And obviously, one issue is that Sybil attacks is that we want to make it really easy to add modules to the network. Like it takes 2 seconds to do it. And so the issue there is someone can create a loop and then create a bunch of fake modules that don't do much. So having validators that validate like the application, or even users to use like basically to use the stake they get, or maybe delegate their stake to essentially choose which modules should stay on the network is what, like, that's kind of like the next like maybe few weeks to month vision. So getting that bridge is important for getting people to see like, oh shit, I can turn this into value.
Right on, cool. Is there anything else that you maybe had to skim over that you want to give a little more context on? You have a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So I want to basically go maybe like in terms of like the namespace. So let me actually just deploy it. Let me quickly go through just deploying. I have so many tabs open. So I'm just going to go to demo.
You've got about a minute, by the way. So
yeah. So I'll just deploy this one. So I'll do demo C. So this is, notice how this
present if you want us to be able to see.
Oh shit.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no, all good. So it's a waste of time. All right, so yeah, okay. So demos. So if I just do serve, this will basically just serve it. Right now it serves it locally. So there's local namespace and there's like a global there's like a commune namespace. So if I just want to like call it locally, like I could just do like see what my modules are, and then I don't know, I could just do local, and then it will basically show me, all right, I got all these demos here. Demo C is one of them. So I just deployed that, right? So I want to see what the logs are there. So all right, so now it's running here. So let me get, okay, I'm gonna call demo, and then let me get the info of it, because I don't know what the fuck it is, maybe. Oh shit, it's called something else. Oh wait, no, it's demo C. Sometimes
okay.
if you deploy something that doesn't work,
sorry, I do have to cut you off now because
all right, sure, no worries.
Yeah, we're at 15 minutes, so we have one more presenter. But thank you very much for that, and I'm glad we got to see even a little demo. Well, thanks, Sal. Okay, so it's 45 minutes to the hour, so I'm going to bring up our last presenter. I'd like to introduce David Minarsch. David is the founder and CEO of Valory, who is hosting this event. So, hello, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we're all good.
All right, just give me a second with the screen.
Yeah, no problem. And then
are you able to see it?
Okay, I'm going to put your slides up now.
Awesome.
Okay, go for it.
Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's been a great set of presentations. Really enjoyed it. So my presentation, I want to kind of continue from where I left off last time and talk a bit more about the applications which we've been building at this intersection of crypto and AI, particularly leveraging LLMs. So last time I was talking about this pyramid, and it's actually a good entry point to this conversation, because the way we currently look at LLMs is that we consider them as essentially thinking tools for decentralized autonomous agents. So let me explain and recap for a second what I mean by all this. At Autonomous, we are focused on creating this concept of decentralized autonomous agents. So that's like a level up from an autonomous agent, an autonomous software agent, of which there are many exciting frameworks to build these agents in, including some which I was involved offering. And these decentralized autonomous agents, which you can build with the Autonomous stack, increasingly use AI tools and particularly LLMs to become core parts of their architecture. And today I really want to first focus on these use cases, which we're currently exploring, and then show you where we are headed on that journey. Now, a quick recap on how we think about decentralized autonomous agents. We also refer to them as autonomous services. They're effectively made up of multiple nodes that run off-chain and that collectively form one application, the autonomous agent. So effectively, this kind of software autonomous agents, which arise as the sort of higher level outcome of this distributed decentralized system. And because it's running off-chain, it can interact with all sorts of data sources, including tools like LLMs, and it can then take actions on-chain. So we are at the at Valerie, and which is the company hosting this series of talks, and also one of the creators of Autonomous. At Valerie, we currently very early in our in our journey to basically utilize LLMs. And so today we'll cover some of those examples. One use case which we launched earlier this year is really focused on this idea of autonomous governance. It's aptly named the Governator. You can access it here. It's live. You can use it. Now, how do we use LLMs here? Effectively, each agent in this hexagon, which you saw a couple of moments ago, each agent in this autonomous service connects to an LLM instance. In this case, it doesn't really matter where this LLM instance lives. So you can have a centralized LLM like OpenAI's different instances. You can use something like Claude, another centralized instance, or you could use one of those open source instances, which for instance, David referred to earlier. The agent then prompts that LLM instance with a proposal and the aggregate voting intent, both of which it obviously gets from other data sources. So the proposal it gets from either the governance contract or snapshot, and the aggregate voting intent was effectively delegated to it by the users of the Governator. And the agent then uses that to effectively establish how it should be voting on that particular proposal. And so there's effectively then this happening n times, i.e. as many times as there are agents in the autonomous service. And the autonomous service then as a whole aggregates the responses and can apply various additional logic to ensure that the system as a whole behaves sensibly. That's very important because LLMs are not deterministic. So it might actually happen that with the exact same input, you get different responses at different times. And so it's very important to have this sort of aggregation kind of logic which an autonomous service offers you. Now, as a user, what you effectively get is an autonomous delegatee. You can delegate its token to the Governator, your tokens to the Governator, and the Governator will then henceforth vote autonomously on any upcoming proposals for which it holds tokens. And another use case which went live, I think, a month and a half ago, is focused on this idea that we want to make it as frictionless as possible for sort of crypto native entities to access any sort of AI tool. So it connects a bit with what we just heard from Sal. Effectively, all you need a wallet. You don't need API keys. You just need a wallet. And with that wallet, you can access various tools. At the moment, AI Max, which is also a live product we have, supports, for instance, OpenAI's various endpoints as well as Stability AI's various endpoints. You can see them here, and you can interact via a simple client technology, for instance, on the command line with this Mac. Anyone can, in fact, also deploy a Mac. And so in this instance, for instance, that client can live in your front-end application. It could live as part of your back-end application. It could live as part of another autonomous service. And the benefit is that you no longer, as the requesting entity, need to hold any API key to these centralized tools. all you need to do is effectively pay for your request in a cryptocurrency of your choice. In this case, the system is deployed on Gnosis. A more advanced and, again, end-user facing product, which we've started developing and is currently in alpha stage, is called Centaurs. The use case we've explored there so far is focused on a co-pilot for DAOs. This kind of concept of co-creation was mentioned earlier in Jiao's talk as well. Effectively here, what happens is that the users of this product, the Centaur, can not just own a social media account, but also use these AI Max, which I introduced a second ago, as a backend system as an LLM. So again, the benefit is that users of a Centaur who might effectively be like a multi-sig wallet, a group of users, they do no longer have to have any sort of API keys for these things. They can just provide, for instance, a small number of XDAI into their Centaur, and then the Centaur can use AI systems like LLMs for summarization or chat functionality as a backend. And then a final use case I want to introduce, which we are currently working on heavily and which will come live in mid-July. And we'll make a number of announcements around what that means for developers and the ecosystem, is one focused on AI-powered prediction markets. Effectively, this idea came out of the Gnosis ecosystem. In collaboration with them, we identified that our trading agent, our autonomous agent software really suits itself to build autonomous trading agent and autonomous market making agents. And combined with AI Max, you then get this exciting possibility where you could create an entire AI-powered prediction market, potentially with no human involvement whatsoever, although, of course, it can complement existing human prediction markets. So, yeah, stay tuned on that one. So where are we going with all of this? Well, again, Autonolas, the DAO and ecosystem is focused on many different types of off-chain services, which all kind of connect and consume each other. In the context of autonomous agent systems, we are currently doing 3 very concrete things. Algovera, Richard, who was the first presenter, is working on a grant with us, which will bring LLM programming capabilities to the open autonomy stack. With the Gnosis ecosystem, we're collaborating on these AI prediction markets and have already brought the AI Max. And then at Valerie, we're really heavily focused on bringing new products, specifically around the Centaurs, and making them truly autonomous agent systems. Now, I just want to close out on effectively pointing you to our new site. The team has, the DAO's team has worked on this over recent weeks, and it's a much more distilled description of what Autonolas is about, what it offers, and how you can get involved. So I suggest you check it out. Thank you for your time, and thanks again for all the speakers. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too.
Awesome. Thank you very much, David. So now we have a few more minutes before we'll switch over to our open discussion. So I'll invite people to share text-based questions in the chat tab under stage, and I'll read them out so that when replay viewers watch the video, they'll be able to hear the question as well as the answer. So let me just check for those really quickly. Okay, I think maybe people have said. So while we're waiting, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the Centaurs like UX, because I think that's very directly related to our theme of LLMs in crypto.
Yeah. So Centaurs is a very ambitious product, and we will spend a lot of time in the coming months to bring new functionalities and experiences to it. At the moment, it works a bit like a co-owned social media account with some cool features, let's say. So we very concretely, we are using it now in the context of the autonomous DAO to actually allow the DAO to create social content for Twitter and other platforms. Co-create. So this theme of co-creation came up a lot. In that context, the LLM can be used in a couple of ways. So firstly, throughout the process of actually creating the content, you can use prompt templates, which, for instance, the DAO has co-created to ensure that a certain tone is met, that a certain kind of maybe set of legal conditions are satisfied around how certain things are described or referenced, and that it's understandable to the audience and kind of connects with the prior flow of content. Another element, I think David Vorick brought it up, is this kind of user education. So very early iterations of Centaurs were heavily focused on this. So basically the co-creation was around creating some sort of memory, which then could be consumed by new arrivals to the DAO. We're still in the early stages of exploring this, but I think what you can all look forward to is that we're definitely bringing much more autonomous functionality to the Centaurs. So far, most of it has really focused on the co-pilot features, and this kind of autonomous self-executing features will come more. So a bit more like the Governator.
Okay, cool. So we've got about 1 minute, and you can answer this one pretty quickly. So I'll just give it. Okay, actually, kind of another quite long one. So Peter would like to know how developers apply for Valerie grants to work on the stack. So I think that'll be a pretty quick answer.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Peter, firstly, I think today there went a tweet out from the DAO, which is all about how the autonomous incentive program works. That's permissionless, so you don't need to go to Valerie at all. And I think we can put it in here later. The team can put it in so you can find it. There's also Valerie as just a startup. We're working with other startups to solve key problems with autonomous agents and decentralized autonomous agents or autonomous services at the intersection of AI and crypto. So if you feel like you have like some proposition which intersects with what we do, then yes, we are very happy to hear about it. And at the moment, there's no formal process. You can just get in touch.
Okay, cool. And then we have one more question, and I think I can answer this maybe a little better than you can. This is from Katie, who says they love the enthusiasm and passion of all the speakers. And in the future, they've requested that we aim to include more diverse perspectives, like women or queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, people of color, human beings, like leaders at the DAIR Institute and other interesting folks with a range of bias-deflecting perspectives to better AI plus Web3 and humanity. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the selection process and how we got the speakers that we got. I will say I did assemble the speaking list quite quickly, and I mostly focused on people who could meet the topic, which needed to be LLMs and crypto. So that very much narrowed who was available. Yeah, and then literally just who was available, and the actual slots, assigning of the slots was pretty competitive. So the agenda filled up really quickly, and I just ended up going up with the people that I have. Thank you very much for this link to the DAIR Institute. If you want to maybe get in touch with me behind the scenes and you'd like to suggest particular people that I could reach out to, that would be great, because I would say the most difficult thing about staffing these or about filling up these agendas is who's available and just who gets back to me in time, because yeah, we're trying to move very quickly. But thank you very much for that question. So it's 2 minutes after the hour. So now we're going to switch to an open discussion format. And I'll bring up some of our other speakers who are available. And we'll use this section to just kind of talk about maybe some questions that we didn't get to answer, ideas related to what our speakers have presented on, and other things. So let me know if you don't want to be on the stream, but we still have Sal here and Christian. Sal, if you're not available, let me know and I can take you down. Yeah, but I'll take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers today. You guys did really excellent work. We still have Richard with us. I'll bring him up. And I was very glad that we were able to go deeper on this topic and have another rather specific focus. Our previous session focused on interoperability and this idea of collaboratively setting standards together. And this one, we wanted to focus more specifically on how people are using LLMs. And I think all of you showed different approaches to ways that crypto can improve LLMs and the way that LLMs can improve crypto, because there's quite a few overlaps there. So I'll give you guys the floor, and if you want to ask each other some questions, or maybe we can I also have some questions for Richard that I didn't see because they went into a channel that doesn't show up on my host feed. I like this question from Adriano, who's a team member at Valerie. Adriano asked what we see as the foundational building blocks of a decentralized operating system for AI.
Yeah, sure. So I think I responded on it as well, and it depends what you mean by building blocks, I guess. So there's kind of the LLM building blocks, and there's also the crypto building blocks. So I tend to think of the building blocks more as on the LLM side. So these are things like, for example, a knowledge base, maybe a data lake, maybe some sort of long-term memory store where you can store information that is larger than can fit in the prompt, for example. Also tools and APIs, also registries,
oh my goodness,
different apps and stuff. And yeah, so these are some of the different building blocks, the different components, and then all of these different building blocks should run on top of decentralized infrastructure. And these different infrastructure components could be things like, decentralized storage, like IPFS, decentralized compute protocols, decentralized marketplace protocols, decentralized access control. All of these different technologies can be used to implement these different building blocks.
Yeah. I would just say one of the big things is not for everyone to come in this space to try and not reinvent the wheel. We should really need to leverage the fact that we're all building on common standards on top of kind of Ethereum, on top of EVM, even Solana. We're using common standards for our wallets. We can use transactions for Etherscan for being able to see kind of a provenance on there. So except using kind of NFTs, ERC20s, and don't everyone try to reinvent the wheel. Everyone can find a special niche that they provide and not have to work. And then that's how we kind of beat Web 2, understanding that everyone's working on the same stuff as opposed to everyone trying to make their specific proprietary one the winner.
Yeah, along those lines, actually, I saw something yesterday that was really fascinating. It was a guy who's creating a DSL, a domain-specific language specific to image generation prompts. If you've ever tried to do image generation, you get into all these weird, quirky things, rendered on Octane to get really high resolution, beautiful, volumetric lighting and things like that. And so this person tried to codify how objects interrelate in the context of an image and has a structured approach to it. So I think I agree with you, Christian. I think it's important to sort of think about the standards, but some people are actually really pushing the envelope and creating new ones that are very, very creative. I thought that was one of the cooler projects I've seen in recent days. I encourage you all to check it out.
This is a big open question whether natural language is the best thing to use for prompts. A lot of people are creating pseudo languages. So there's pseudo lang and stuff, which is just much more specific. I guess it's language that is more like code so that there's less nuance in it. So there's some really interesting stuff on that too.
Yeah, if you ever try to get GPT-4 to compress some paragraph into the smallest possible string of characters and emojis, it's actually amazing how much it can compress and decompress. It's almost like a pseudo embedding. It'd be exciting to sort of explore that a little bit more deeply. How do you all think about the sort of UX, UI? I think it's been really interesting to see how something like ChatGPT sort of already existed for a few years, and then really it was like the chat interface that really resonated with users. Are you all aware of any interesting alternatives or sort of explorations that people are thinking about?
Yeah, I think chat is just the first interface for sure, and I don't think we want to turn everything into a text box. So there's like a lot of people talking about how we can move beyond the text box, and people are even starting to explore, dynamically generating UIs that might be ephemeral, which I think is super cool. And there's actually something Valerie kind of put me onto like finite state machines a lot, because that's what they use in their agent framework. And just by chance, I came across. I was thinking about the intersection of agents and finite state machines in general. So in other words, rather than using like chains and workflows, should we be using finite state machines in LangChain, which I think was a really interesting idea. And I sent out a tweet on Twitter saying, anyone thinking about the intersection of finite state machines and agents? And someone wrote back from the front end space. And there's like a whole bunch of like new front end frameworks that are also using finite state machines to transition between states. And so like what I'm thinking now is, how do like finite state machines on the like ML side, how can they tie in with finite state machines on the front end, and maybe even tie in with like finite state machines on the back end as well? If we can create these different states in all of the different places, and that's so depending on which state we're in the finite state machine, it like generates a new UI. I think that could be really, really interesting.
That's really cool. Yeah. I encourage you to talk to people in gaming. Folks who are developing NPCs, they think a lot about FSMs, especially now in the context of these LLMs. I think maybe they have some interesting ideas.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, I guess like what's kind of happened is that the UI has become such a focus, like almost to the point where, like, not in the last few months, like with technology over the last 2 decades, to the focus, which has created this kind of focus on people basically going around, clicking around, doing things. Like it's very focused on the user doing things. And I think like there's still like this, like people talking a lot about autonomous agents now, but I think what they haven't quite grokked yet is that this is not about you interacting with your autonomous agent all the time. It's about the autonomous agent ultimately being autonomous and creating outcomes for you, where you can kind of get time back effectively from looking at the screen, clicking around on the screen, doing all this stuff. I mean, if you zoom out, like it's not ideal how increasingly we're even more tied to the screen and have to do even more. So I think that's where Valerie ultimately kind of also focuses on. It's like this idea of autonomy and kind of effectively almost like kind of having the machines create outcomes for you. And that's in a way kind of everyone today talked about this. But I think there's still a lot to be done to bring that into the user experience of new products, where we often start out basically with like preconception of, oh, I need like a website with a login bar, and then like it needs to look like this and so on. So I think we're very early there, basically.
Yeah,
I'd love to get your perspective. Oh,
I was just gonna say, from a US perspective, I also think that I guess my camera went off because I have bad connection. But anyway, yeah, I think one of the cool things for UX that crypto can really help in is, I think in the future, people aren't going to want to kind of choose a particular provider of like their autonomous agent or tool and then upload all their data and then be stuck with them. Or they're not going to want to have to redo that process every time they want to try out a new service and go through that entire process again of re-uploading and then having their data stored there, where it's like we're kind of repeating the same problems we've had with like kind of network effects, where once you get a lot of people, you kind of have that data advantage. Where I think what crypto can do really cool is make it possible for people to upload their data one time to either decentralized storage, then kind of tokenize their access to that, then allow to share access easily between these different providers, like, and allow them to kind of take access to use my data. Here's the context to personalize your experience and easily revoke it away. So now, similar to the concept of you only have to log in one time with Web3 whenever you connect to a site, it's going to be the same thing here. We're going to want to upload your data one time and then just share access to it to these different providers instead of re-uploading it for every different one you choose.
Well, I don't know if you saw this, Christian, but Peter had a question directed towards you about how we can open source data models and while still maintaining high quality standards.
So I think for that, it's like a really cool thing is being able to start leveraging the ability to kind of like tokenize and put on chain like the records of human eval that goes into it. And so one thing with Ocean, some example use case, okay, someone publishes a data set, they've tied what the schema is, like what the data model is for creating it. And now people want to judge how good it is. And so people kind of attach their identity to, okay, I'm a human evaluator. I have a credentials to actually be judging this and kind of be doing this well. I'm attesting that I'm also going to be judging it to the best of my ability. And so then we can run that model and then conduct those kind of like screenings. Okay, this data set actually did produce a model that outbeat these other models on the LLM leaderboard. And this transaction hash right here is kind of where I immediately put my kind of the directions and the methodology I went into for grading it. So then instead of having the LLM leaderboards where we're trying to reconnect, people publish their paper on one site, their data set linked to another one, their even eval another place, they can kind of have like a single source of truth using on-chain as a ledger for connecting all these different pieces together. And so you can have full auditability of how a data set was created from and who it was created from, who evaluated the data set, what type of model was trained on it. And so by literally allowing this kind of like single source of truth all on the same transaction rails, I think we can kind of allow like spreading of open data models while still allowing kind of like transparency and like commercial viability and high standards. Like one thing I think is really cool is the concept of being able to connect all these different AI papers to have them directly be attached to the code and like the data sets they created where, okay, we created our paper directly and here are our results, like the transaction half of how we immediately put our results in. So now it's also another additional benefits for recreating where now it's like for recreating, all you have to do is kind of run it yourself on your own servers, on your own infrastructure, and you should be able to get the same results. And so it's just a lot less like duplication of work where we can start to embrace how you can like have an immutable source of truth by using crypto in this space.
Cool. I'll also answer the first part of the question. Peter asked when our next event would be. So soon. I think we'd definitely like to do this again. I would be curious to hear from our speakers what our topics could be. I think that would be the next step would be to choose another specific topic like this where we can advance the conversation in a particular direction. Once we do that, we can, I would definitely like to take Katie's feedback into account and look for different perspectives. Particularly, I also did quite like the idea of taking these bias deflecting perspectives into account because that's something that's coming up in like all of these systems. Anytime you build a system, you're running the risk of even by unintentionally or intentionally or unintentionally adding in these biases in it. So that's definitely something we could think about. If you'd like to reach out with maybe feedback about what ideas you think we could have for our next session or potential speakers that might be willing to participate, you can get in touch with me on either the Valerie Twitter account or my own personal account, which is @ThomasMcBride. Because we have a couple more minutes left, let me just quickly. Okay. Well, Joao's gone, but thank you very much for that. I don't see any more text questions. We said we would have maybe about 15 or 20 minutes of discussion. So maybe we can have some, final thoughts here, and then I can let you guys go.
I think what will be exciting to see, and I don't think we covered it very much today, is with this arrival of so many machines on the scene, what that will do for products and curation and these online experiences. So in a way, like I see everything you were saying, Christian. In another way, I'm also just like, well, can't the machine just do it? Like a lot of it seems we're still thinking in a very human-centric way where we haven't really appreciated how much like autonomous machines can actually do for us. And I think that will, just break up even more in the coming months because it will just accelerate.
One thing is, have any of you guys attempted to kind of create your own like good data sets for fine tuning a model for any particular purpose? Like an experience like trying that out?
I think like we're more focused on like building with LLMs, I suppose. I think that's a really interesting thing that data marketplaces could be used for, which they're not at the moment, which is like storing the context that's used to drive in context learning or any of that sort of stuff. Yeah, I guess like just to agree with David, I think like what we're definitely most interested in Algovera is the app layer. I feel like we're always talking about like infrastructure in the crypto space, and I think like what we're really missing are the use cases and applications. So like what I'm really excited about is stuff like what David presented, which are like all of these different LLM apps that are currently running on Autonomous, and I'd really love to build a builder community around this, and that's why I kind of wanted to like go back to basics and talk about the different LLM components and how everyone can use these to like build LLM apps. And you don't need to be a machine learning engineer because it's actually like really accessible. There's like JavaScript versions, there's Python versions. And yeah, I'd really love to just create this builder community, not just around like crypto infrastructure, but also LLM apps, but in the crypto space. I think that would be super valuable, building different agents, building different workflows, building different assistants. And hopefully this is one of the things that is going to be built at the hackathon around ETHCC that like many people here are co-organizing or sponsoring. Just in case anyone hasn't heard about it, we're going to have like 100 hackers at a 2-day event in Paris. We're actually going to announce it today, I think. So that's going to be super cool, just like bringing the AI world and the crypto world together. A bunch of AI sponsors like Stability AI, Hugging Face, Llama Index coming together with a bunch of like crypto infrastructure as well. So hopefully a bunch of like stuff is going to blossom with that, and we can just like really kickstart this builder community around like LLM apps running on decentralized infrastructure.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much. We're at 20 minutes past the hour now, so we're already quite a bit over time. I want to thank everybody who presented. Feel free to drop off if you're done. I'd love for you to keep up to date with us. You can follow us on Twitter, Valerie AG. I'll be posting a recap link to everyone's talks. Also the entire conference event. If you want to watch all of the talks, maybe you missed one, you can check that out. It'll probably be going out. It takes me a little while to edit the video, but it usually over the next week, you'll see the talks and content that were presented today. And I'll also be trying to gather up as many links to slides, resources from our speakers. And yeah, I just want to thank all of our attendees today and all of our speakers for contributing. You guys did a really excellent job, and I think we all learned a lot. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.